I died in the penthouse I paid for. Funny how poetic that sounds, except there was nothing poetic about dying alone on a cold marble floor while my CEO boyfriend toasted champagne with my stepsister in the next room. The same penthouse I remodeled. The same man I built up from nothing. The same woman who used to steal my clothes when we were kids. The last thing I heard was Celeste's laughter. Hi, sweet, mocking. Then nothing. But fate? Fate gave me a second chance. I woke up gasping, choking on air as if I'd come up from drowning. I was in my old apartment, the tiny one-bedroom I'd lived in before Daniel became a household name. Before I gave him my savings. Before I handed him my heart, my time, my loyalty, and watched him trade it for champagne and a woman who looked like me if you squinted and had no morals. My phone buzzed. A familiar name flashed on the screen. Daniel. And the date? 5 years earlier. 5 years before I died broke, betrayed, and forgotten. This time, I didn't answer. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat there in that dingy apartment with its peeling wallpaper and buzzing fridge and stared at my hands. The same hands that once signed a check for $75,000 to help Daniel fund his first company. The same hands that decorated his first office. That rubbed his temples through every failure and clapped the loudest at every staged victory. No more. The first thing I did was walk to my old desk drawer and pull out the manila folder I knew would be there. My inheritance papers. Back then, I'd been too in love to care about the fine print. I'd signed it all away. This time, I read every word. This time, I didn't touch a single cent until I had a plan. Daniel had always been charming in that lazy, entitled way. Handsome, sure. Confident, yes. But under all that, he was a parasite. And I had been his willing host. But 5 years from now, his company would be on the brink of collapse. Not because of bad luck, but because of him. Because I wouldn't be there to fix it anymore. I disappeared before he could trap me again. I blocked his number. Quit my job. Vanished from social media. When Celeste texted me, clearly still pretending to be a sister while secretly plotting behind my back, I told her I was taking a break from toxic relationships. She liked the message. I laughed. In the old timeline, I'd stood by while Daniel dated me in secret so he could pretend to be single to investors. I let Celeste stay in our guest room after her modeling career fell apart. I was the good girl. The quiet one. The woman who waited. This time, I wasn't waiting. I cashed in one of my smaller inheritance bonds and booked a one-way flight to Singapore. Nobody knew me there. But I remembered what would happen. Which apps would blow up. Which tech companies would go public. I spent every night poring over news articles, startup lists, crypto trends, even gossip forums. I watched from the shadows. I wasn't going to build a brand with my face on it. No. That's what Daniel would expect. He always said I didn't have the killer instinct to make it on my own. That I was meant to support him. Like a wife. Like an assistant. Like a doormat. I founded my first company under an alias. Phoenix Holdings. Fitting, right? Rising from ashes and all that. I started with small investments, companies that I knew would thrive because I'd already seen them do it. A fitness app that would be acquired by Apple. A fashion resale platform that would get a huge shout-out on a celebrity's Instagram. A tech startup that would be mocked on Shark Tank and then blow up 6 months later. Every dollar multiplied. Every investment gave me more power. More anonymity. By year 2, I had a network of shell companies. A team of ghost employees. A vault of digital assets and offshore accounts. I still wore the same basic jeans and drank cheap coffee, but my net worth? It was crawling into 8 figures. I watched Daniel rise in the public eye, giving cocky interviews, throwing lavish parties in that penthouse I'd once dreamed of owning. I watched Celeste drape herself over him like a prize. I watched and waited. Not because I wanted him back. But because I wanted the perfect moment to take it all. He wouldn't see me coming. Because to him I was gone. Erased. A footnote in his success story. But I was alive. And this time I wasn't going to save him. I was going to own him. The first time Daniel cheated, I forgave him. He blamed stress, alcohol, a lapse in judgment. Said he didn't even remember the girl's name. I told myself love was messy. That every couple had rough patches. That my loyalty would win in the end. I didn't realize I was being trained to accept less, to bend, to stay small. This time, I didn't stay for a second round. After disappearing, I moved in silence. No posts. No check-ins. I created a fake name and enrolled in a coding boot camp. Not because I wanted to become a coder, but because I needed to understand what I was about to own. I spent days listening, taking notes, learning the language of the next wave of tech. My classmates thought I was shy. Quiet. I was neither. I was watching. Every night, I studied the markets. I tracked seed funding rounds, predicted viral trends before they hit, followed founders like they were celebrities. Knowledge became my currency. Power became my fuel. And I knew exactly what my first real kill would be. A tiny AI startup on the verge of collapse. In my first life, Daniel had laughed when I suggested he invest. He said it was a gimmick. But 5 years later, that same company would become a unicorn after a viral celebrity endorsement and a last-minute pivot to education tech. I offered the founder a lifeline. A full buyout. Under the name of my shell firm, of course. He agreed. Desperation makes people move fast. I rewrote the company's code structure, rebranded it, and funneled cash into a campaign I knew would go viral. It hit the top of Product Hunt 3 weeks later. A month after that, Apple reached out. I didn't take the call. I had no face to show. That was the point. Meanwhile, Daniel's company, Harrington Dynamics, was coasting off one good product launch and hype. The press loved him. But I knew the cracks. He was borrowing against future profits. Overleveraged. Hiring too fast, too wide. And he had no idea what was coming. By year 3, I started quietly buying influence. Not just shares, people. I knew who Daniel would try to poach in the future. A brilliant young marketing VP from Dubai. A data scientist from Seoul. An operations manager from one of his rival startups. I found them before he did and made them offers they couldn't refuse. High pay. Full creative control. Total anonymity. They didn't even know who I really was. Just that their new employer had deep pockets and no corporate red tape. One of them joked during onboarding, "It's like being hired by a ghost." I smiled. Let them think that. Back home, Daniel was engaged. To Celeste. They announced it with a glitzy photo shoot on a yacht. Celeste wore white, like it wasn't her third engagement. Daniel looked smug, like he'd won some invisible war. His caption read, "Built this empire with the woman who always believed in me." I stared at the screen and remembered how, in my first life, I cried when I saw that post. I remembered the feeling of being erased. This time, I just bookmarked it. Because I knew the real truth. Celeste never believed in Daniel. She believed in the money. She believed in clout. And Daniel? He never built anything. I did. From the spreadsheets to the pitches to the furniture in his office, I had done that. And I had bled for it. Now, I was building again. But this time, no one would take it from me. I hired a forensic accountant to audit every business Daniel touched. I wanted to know the second he stepped near any company tied to me. I also knew his weakness, his obsession with image. He hated being outshined. So I stayed in the shadows, letting my companies outperform his quietly. No billboards. No profiles. Just results. And when Harrington Dynamics began planning their IPO, I knew the time was coming. Daniel needed a final injection of investor capital to make it happen. He didn't realize that 2 of his major backers were now under my umbrella. That one of his lead advisors was on my payroll. That the penthouse he thought he bought with pride was financed through a mortgage held by a bank that I had quietly acquired. All I had to do was wait for him to make the wrong move. And I didn't have to wait long. He announced a new product, some flashy AI-powered tool that promised to revolutionize productivity. I knew it wouldn't work. Not because the idea was bad, but because his team wasn't ready. Half his engineers had quit. The rest were stretched thin. His ego was writing checks his company couldn't cash. I scheduled a meeting. With him. As an anonymous investor representing a new media tech fund. I gave them a fake name. A male assistant. A faceless team. Daniel didn't recognize the voice on the call. Why would he? I'd learned how to speak in sharp, clipped tones. Like money. He agreed to the meeting. I would step into that penthouse boardroom in a few days. The same boardroom where he'd once told me to wait outside while he handled the important discussions. This time, I wouldn't be waiting. This time, I'd be buying the whole table. I didn't sleep the night before the meeting. Not because I was nervous. But because I wanted to remember every detail. The scent of the wood polish they used in the boardroom. The curve of the crystal decanter Daniel kept on the side table like some self-appointed mogul. The way he used to lean back in that leather chair like a king. I wanted to burn it into my memory so I could savor it when I took it all away. I chose my outfit carefully. Nothing too loud. Black pantsuit, sharp shoulders, gold watch, red lipstick. The kind of look that made people pause before speaking. Not sexy. Not sweet. Powerful. Unapproachable. The kind of woman Daniel always said was too intimidating to marry. The kind of woman he now had no choice but to impress. When I stepped into the lobby of Harrington Dynamics, no one recognized me. The receptionist gave me the once-over, glanced at her screen, and stood quickly when she saw the name my assistant had provided. Ms. Varela, the board is ready for you. Varela. One of the many aliases I now lived behind. There was something delicious about being treated like royalty in a building where I was once invisible. The elevator doors opened directly to the executive floor. Glass walls. City skyline. Cold art that screamed money. I walked the length of the hallway, heels clicking like a countdown. The assistant opened the double doors, and I stepped inside. And there he was. Daniel. Still tall. Still handsome in that sculpted, magazine cover way. But I saw the new wrinkles around his eyes. The slight puffiness from too many late nights, too much wine. He looked at me, and paused. There was a flicker of something. Recognition? Or just confusion? He stood. Smiled. Ms. Varela, thank you for coming. I'm Daniel Harrington, CEO. I returned his smile with the same polite disinterest I reserved for street vendors. I know who you are. He gestured to the seat across from him. I've heard your fund is quite aggressive in acquisitions. That's exactly what we need right now, someone who isn't afraid to take bold steps. I tilted my head. I specialize in buying undervalued assets with bloated egos and unstable foundations. Your company fits perfectly. He chuckled like I'd just told a joke, even though I hadn't. Well, I like someone who doesn't sugarcoat. Celeste walked in mid-meeting, late as usual. She was dressed like she was walking a red carpet, tight dress, designer heels, dripping in diamonds. She looked at me and blinked. For one terrifying second, I thought she'd recognize me. But then her expression settled into vague judgment. Who's this? She asked, barely glancing at Daniel. Investor, Daniel replied. Big one. She walked to his side and placed her hand on his shoulder like she was staking a claim. Make sure she knows we don't sell for cheap. I smiled. I don't buy what I can't control. Her smile froze. I could see it, she didn't like me. She didn't know why, but she didn't like me. Women like Celeste could always sense when someone was more powerful than them. It was instinct. The meeting ended with vague promises of further talks. I said nothing about my intentions. I didn't need to. I'd already bought up 60% of the company's private shareholders through dummy corporations. The takeover wasn't coming. It was already done. I just wanted them to see my face before the crown changed hands. Outside, my driver waited. In the back seat, I pulled out my phone and opened the tracking document. One of Daniel's senior developers had resigned. I already had her offer letter sent out. Another investor had quietly pulled their money. I'd made sure of it. And the bank was calling about their balloon loan, one I had flagged through my private financial analyst. The house of cards was trembling. Later that night, I met with Alex Chen. Technically, it was a business dinner, but he wasn't the kind of man who believed in small talk. A self-made billionaire in tech, Alex was everything Daniel tried to be, but couldn't. Cool, intelligent, direct. And curious. Very curious. He raised a brow across the candlelit table. You move fast. I have deadlines, I said. I've seen people move with ambition. You move like you're chasing someone. I met his gaze. Maybe I'm not chasing. Maybe I'm hunting. He leaned back, clearly intrigued. Tell me something, Varela. Why this company? There are easier targets. I don't do easy. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. I like that. I didn't plan to get close to Alex. That wasn't part of the plan. But when he spoke, I listened. When he offered insight, I took it. When he smiled, it almost made me forget what I was doing. Almost. Because the truth was, I had no room for softness. Not yet. Not until Daniel was on his knees, asking the same question I once cried into a pillow. Why wasn't I enough? The next day, the official buyout paperwork was filed. Harrington Dynamics was mine. The press hadn't caught wind yet, but internally, the shakeup was seismic. Employees whispered. Emails flew. Daniel sent out a company-wide memo pretending everything was fine. He didn't know that the walls were already closing in. The headlines hit 3 days later. Harrington Dynamics faces hostile takeover. Daniel must have thrown something across the room when he read that. I imagined him storming around the penthouse, demanding answers from a board that no longer answered to him. The shares were mine. The seats were mine. The silence he got in return? That was mine too. He tried to fight it. Of course he did. Daniel had always been a showman. The kind of man who believed his charm could bend reality. But charm doesn't change balance sheets. It doesn't unsign contracts. And it doesn't scare lawyers who are paid better than he's ever been. I made sure the takeover was clean. No blood, no press leaks, yet. I let him drown in whispers and uncertainty. Let his employees watch him lose control one meeting at a time. Let Celeste look at him with those glassy eyes she used when things stopped being fun. It was only a matter of time before she started calling lawyers. She always did when the money ran low. I kept my distance, but I watched everything. My favorite part? The way Daniel started rehearsing fake smiles before interviews. I'd seen that look before, the twitch in his jaw, the panic behind his pupils. The same look he had the day I told him I was out of money and he called me a liability. I used to think that moment broke me. But it didn't. It revealed me. Meanwhile, Alex had started asking questions. He was too smart not to notice the patterns. My investment trail. My interest in Daniel. My avoidance of public appearances. We met again in a quiet rooftop bar, the kind that didn't ask names and had no cameras. He slid a glass of bourbon across the table. You're not just a strategist. No? No. You're surgical. Every move you make, cutting, precise, calculated. That's not business. That's personal. I stared at him. Alex didn't blink. Who is he? He asked softly. Who did he take from you? For a moment, I said nothing. Just watched the city lights flicker like embers. Then I spoke. He took everything. And then he left me with the bill. Alex nodded, like he understood more than he was letting on. You're not just here to win. You're here to ruin him. I looked him in the eye. And I will. He tapped his glass against mine. Then let me know when it's time to twist the knife. It should have been a red flag. A man like Alex offering help in something so dirty, so deeply personal. But instead, I felt a pull toward him. He wasn't soft. He wasn't trying to fix me. He was just watching me do what I had to do, and offering to make it cleaner. I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. But I stopped pretending I was just a ghost investor. I let him see glimpses. The night I told him about Celeste and the engagement party. The night I mentioned the penthouse. The way my voice shifted when I said Daniel's name. He noticed. He didn't push. He just stayed close. Back at Harrington Dynamics, Daniel was unraveling. He called an emergency board meeting and found half the members had resigned. The rest deferred to me. He tried to contact the company's legal counsel. Only to find they'd been acquired in a merger that I arranged. He went home to Celeste, who had started booking spa weekends without telling him. When he asked her about their wedding, she laughed and said, "Let's see how the quarter goes." The quarter didn't go well. His latest product launch was a disaster. Too many bugs. Delayed rollout. Terrible reviews. I didn't sabotage anything, I didn't have to. I just stopped helping. And without me behind the curtain, the entire machine collapsed under the weight of his ego. But I wasn't done. I booked one final meeting with him, this time in the boardroom of his own penthouse suite. I requested it formally, through legal channels. Left no room for refusal. He showed up late, of course, trying to cling to control. Wearing his best suit, like armor. He looked at me across the table, eyes narrowed. You've had your fun. What do you want now? I tilted my head. You. He blinked. I want you to sit there, I said slowly, and realize that everything you own, everything you built, was mine first. I want you to know that the person you discarded didn't disappear. She became the storm. He stared at me. For the first time, no arrogance. No charm. Just silence. I stood. Walked to the window overlooking the skyline. I'm not here to take revenge, I said softly. I already did that. I'm here to finish it. And when I turned back, he looked smaller. Like the walls had finally started closing in. I left him sitting in that boardroom, speechless and stunned, and I didn't look back. It was better that way. The fall always feels longer when you're left alone with the echo of your own pride. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want groveling. I wanted him to understand that I had become something he could never control, never touch, and certainly never recover from. The buyout was officially complete by the end of the week. Harrington Dynamics was now under the umbrella of Phoenix Holdings. I didn't change the name. I wanted him to watch it rot with his name still on it. Let the public think he ran it into the ground all by himself. Let them speculate. Let them forget. The headlines turned brutal fast. Tech star stumbles, Harrington's empire shaken by mass resignations. CEO's fiancé flees as fortune falls. And then the most delicious one, new investor stays anonymous amidst takeover frenzy. Who is Ms. Varela? Celeste released a statement through her PR team saying she had stepped back to focus on herself. Translation, she was gone the second the money dried up. She didn't even say goodbye. Just drained their joint account and booked a villa in Santorini. I almost respected her consistency. Daniel tried to save face. He appeared on a livestream, all false optimism and tight smiles. But the mask was slipping. Comment sections turned ruthless. People called him sloppy, arrogant, outdated. Some even speculated he'd been sabotaged from within. He had no idea how right they were. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. Let the mystery grow. Let them wonder who I was, how I did it. Power wasn't always loud, it was the kind of silence that made people nervous. And Daniel? He was very, very nervous. Still, I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. I wanted a final performance. One last act to end the show. I threw a party. A masquerade gala under the name of one of my shell charities. Black tie, ultra-exclusive, the kind of event Daniel used to beg to be invited to. This time, I sent him a personal invitation. No sender name, just a golden envelope with his initials embossed on the front. He came. Of course he did. Curiosity was his fatal flaw. He arrived in a custom suit, still clinging to the image of success. But it didn't fit him anymore. Not the suit, not the smile, not the stage. He moved like a man who didn't know where to stand. The crowd didn't part for him like it used to. The cameras didn't flash when he passed. And when I entered, he froze. My mask was gold and sharp-edged. My dress was black, structured, regal. I walked past him like I didn't recognize him. Like he was just another guest. I could feel his eyes trailing me across the ballroom. He followed, of course. He caught me by the arm near the terrace. Varela, he said. His voice was low, desperate. Please. I turned slowly, savoring the moment. Please what? He swallowed. Tell me why. Tell me who you really are. I leaned in close enough for him to see the shimmer on my lips. You knew me once. But you didn't look closely. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? I reached up, touched the edge of my mask, and whispered, I was the woman you left behind. Then I walked away. He didn't follow. Alex was waiting at the edge of the room, watching everything with a quiet intensity that made my heart do something inconvenient. He didn't ask what I said. He didn't need to. He offered me his arm, and I took it. As we danced, he spoke low into my ear. You're dangerous. I smiled. You're still here. He shrugged. I like danger. Especially when it wears heels and ruins billionaires. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. Because this wasn't just revenge anymore. It was rebirth. I hadn't just taken Daniel's company. I'd taken back every piece of myself he tried to destroy. My time. My talent. My voice. My future. And now, I had something else too, something he never saw coming. Someone who didn't need to be rescued. Someone who stood beside me, not above me. The party was the last nail in Daniel's coffin, and I hammered it in with a smile. Every guest that night saw what he didn't want them to see. That he no longer mattered. That the world had shifted beneath his feet, and he hadn't noticed until he was already irrelevant. The golden boy was now the ghost. And I was the one throwing the gala. A week later, I released the story to the press. Not directly. I'd built entire media channels in my silence, some of them industry blogs and anonymous whistleblower sites. All it took was a few nudges, a couple leaks, a conveniently timed email with internal documents that highlighted Daniel's mishandling of company funds, his questionable board appointments, his late-night expense reports that somehow always ended up in luxury clubs. The headlines hit hard and fast. Ex-CEO under fire for mismanagement. Investors demand accountability from Harrington. Anonymous source exposes financial scandal behind tech collapse. I didn't need to be quoted. I didn't even need to be named. The story spoke for itself. And Daniel? He panicked. He tried to run a damage control campaign, but there was no one left to speak on his behalf. His team had scattered. His lawyer dropped him. His reputation was radioactive. Even Celeste, who was so used to playing arm candy, gave an exclusive interview claiming Daniel had pressured her into silence and that she was shocked by his actions. She even cried on camera. Oscar-worthy. The media tore into him like vultures. Every fake smile, every condescending quote he'd ever given, was recycled and thrown back at him. People began mocking him online. His name became a meme. His former employees started podcasts talking about how toxic the culture had been. His company's value dropped by over 70% in 2 weeks. I watched it all unfold from my penthouse. Not his. Mine. A better one, higher up, with views that made even billionaires pause mid-sentence. I watched from my glass balcony, legs crossed, drink in hand, as the empire I once built for someone else finally burned. And I didn't feel sorry. I felt powerful. Alex visited more often now. He didn't crowd me. Didn't ask for more than I was ready to give. But he made space for me. Every time he walked in, he brought something: wine, news, silence. He never pushed, never demanded. One night, as we looked out at the skyline, he asked me, "What happens next?" I didn't answer right away. Because part of me didn't know. I had achieved everything I came back for. I had taken Daniel's company. I had destroyed his public image. I had exposed the truth. And I'd done it all without breaking a sweat. But revenge was addictive. It gave you purpose, until it didn't. "I think I breathe," I said quietly. Alex turned to me. "You haven't been?" I looked at him. "Not really." He nodded. "Then start. But don't do it alone." He didn't say he loved me. I didn't want that, not yet. I wasn't ready. But I remembered the way Daniel used to say it. Loud, dramatic, rehearsed. Like a sales pitch. Alex didn't use words like that. He used time. Presence. Stillness. That was harder to fake. That week, I sent Daniel a formal offer. A buyback, not of the company. Of the penthouse. The very one he once kicked me out of. He refused, of course. So I waited. The foreclosure hit the next month. He had overleveraged it trying to maintain appearances. And when the auction date was announced, I made the only bid. I bought it for a fraction of what it was worth. And I tore it down. Not the structure, no, that would be too easy. I gutted it. Ripped out every memory. Rebuilt the floors. Changed the walls. Replaced every window, every fixture, every trace of him. Until it wasn't his anymore. Until it was mine. Then I sold it. To a young couple who wanted a fresh start. I gave it to them below market price. I didn't need the profit. I needed the symbolism. Daniel called me. Somehow, he found my number. I didn't block him. I let it ring, then answered. He didn't speak right away. Then he said, "Why?" I almost laughed. "Why what? Why did you do this to me?" I leaned back in my chair. "You did this to yourself." He was quiet. Then, a whisper. "Was it ever real?" "Yes," I said. That was the problem. He hung up. I stared at the blank screen and felt nothing. Because the girl who had loved him? She didn't survive that night on the marble floor. I buried her with the last cent I gave him. The woman I became? She was reborn from fire and betrayal, and this time, she didn't love blindly. She built. She owned. She rose. By the time Daniel's name stopped trending, I was already on my next venture. I didn't need to savor the ruins anymore. I'd had my fill. The world was moving on, and so was I. I had companies to build, cities to conquer, and a silence inside me that finally felt like peace instead of emptiness. But there was one final card left to play. Daniel tried to pitch a comeback. A podcast appearance. A startup mentorship program. He posted filtered photos of tropical retreats, trying to rebrand as a man who had learned from failure. But the comments were brutal. No one was buying the redemption arc. He was invited to speak at a private tech summit. I was on the board. Of course, I didn't use my real name. I had 5 legal identities by then, each with its own companies, investments, and networks. I was the ghost behind the curtain. But I made sure I was in the room when he walked in, wearing that same desperate, polished smile. The attendees gave him polite applause. Polite, because the real players already knew he was done. He walked onto the stage, opened his slides, and launched into a tired monologue about resilience. About bouncing back. About vision. He never mentioned me by name. But I heard it between the lines. I was the cautionary tale. The betrayal he painted as a lesson. A faceless woman who taught him the importance of protecting your assets. I watched him speak and realized something, he still didn't get it. He didn't realize I hadn't just taken his company. I had rewritten the rules of the game. Later, during the mixer, he found me. He didn't recognize me at first. My hair was shorter now. My posture straighter. My smile smaller, sharper. But when I turned to face him fully, his eyes widened. You, he said. No hello. Just that. I took a sip of champagne. Me. He looked like he wanted to say something profound. An apology, maybe. A question. But he just stood there, waiting for me to hand him closure. I didn't. Instead, I said, do you remember the night I bought your company? His jaw tightened. Of course I do. I remember what you said that night, I continued. You said, you'll regret this. He swallowed hard. Do you? I leaned in slightly. Not for a second. I walked away before he could answer. I didn't need to hear what came next. His voice meant nothing now. It was background noise to a life I no longer belonged to. Alex met me outside, waiting beside the car like he always did. No driver. He drove me himself, even when I told him he didn't need to. He said it helped him think. I suspected it helped him watch me when I wasn't looking. As we drove through the city lights, he finally asked the question I'd been expecting. Are you done now? I looked out the window, watching the world blur by. With him? Yes. With revenge? I turned to him. Almost. He nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. Then maybe it's time you start building something for yourself. Not from spite. Not from ashes. But from truth. The words lingered. They didn't demand. They just existed, like a door I could walk through when I was ready. Back in my penthouse, I stood by the window. The skyline stretched before me, glittering and endless. I thought of the girl I used to be. The one who waited by the phone. Who stayed silent during board meetings. Who smiled through insults and called it loyalty. She was gone. Buried. But I remembered her. Not with shame, but with a strange sort of compassion. She died believing love would save her. She was wrong. She saved herself. Alex came up behind me, wrapped an arm around my waist, and rested his chin on my shoulder. No words. Just warmth. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe, deeply, fully. And it didn't hurt. The final closure didn't come with a bang. It came on a Tuesday, in the form of an envelope. A legal notice. Daniel had filed for bankruptcy. The last of his assets were being liquidated. The penthouse was long gone. The cars, the brand deals, the startups he tried to launch in desperation, they all slipped through his fingers. And no one came to catch him. I stared at the letter, then dropped it into the shredder without reading the rest. There was nothing left I needed from him. Revenge had given me direction. It had sharpened me, carved away the softness until I could move through the world with clean efficiency. But it wasn't my destination. It was the road I had to take to find myself again. And now that I wasn't interested in looking back. The past was behind me. What mattered now was what I would build next. Phoenix Holdings expanded quietly. We acquired 2 international banks, a tech security firm, and a media company that had once refused to return my emails. Every acquisition was deliberate. Clean. Unemotional. I didn't need the applause. I just needed the control. Alex came to every quarterly review. He never hovered, never tried to insert himself where he didn't belong. He simply sat at my side, offered insight when asked, and looked at me like I was the center of the storm and the calm inside it at the same time. One night, we ended up on a balcony at a hotel in Milan after a corporate gala. He looked out over the city, then turned to me and said, "You know, if you ever disappeared again, I'd burn the world to find you." I didn't respond with a kiss. I didn't swoon. I simply nodded once and said, "Good." Because I didn't need to be saved. But I didn't mind being wanted. Eventually, I stepped out of the shadows. Not with press conferences or magazine features, but by putting my real name on a foundation for women who had been financially manipulated by their partners. It was quiet at first. Just a website. Then came the emails. The stories. The women. So many of them, all with different faces and the same wounds. I read every one. Some asked me if I'd ever forgive Daniel. If I'd sit across from him and find peace in hearing I'm sorry. I wouldn't. Because he was sorry for losing, not for hurting me. And I didn't need to hear it. I was already whole. 1 year later, I stood outside the building where it had all started. The old Harrington Dynamics headquarters. It had been renamed under Phoenix Holdings. New leadership. New direction. A new plaque on the wall with my name on it. I ran my fingers over the letters and smiled. Then I turned around and left. No ceremony. No cameras. Just quiet satisfaction. Later that evening, I returned to my penthouse, my real one, the one I designed from scratch. Every inch was mine. Every line, every stone, every window. Alex was in the kitchen, barefoot, chopping vegetables like he didn't run one of the largest media empires in the world. He looked up, smiled. "You're late." "Was saying goodbye," I said. He paused. "To what?" I walked over and kissed him. To a girl who thought love meant sacrifice. He wrapped his arms around me. "And what does it mean now?" I leaned my head against his chest and listened to the steady rhythm of someone who had never once tried to dim my light. "Now?" I said. "It means I don't have to lose myself to keep it." He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Because the truth is, I wasn't reborn the day I woke up 5 years in the past. I was reborn the day I chose me. And this time I didn't just survive. I became the billionaire in the penthouse. And no one, not him, not the past, not anyone, was ever taking that away again.